So let's dive right in. There's a little cartoon which sort of tries to introduce the theme, and obviously, as I'm sure many of you already know, especially traditional media like newspapers, but also magazines, of course, but also TV, and to some effect also radio, is under increasing pressure financially, and especially in terms from the whole digitalization move. And IPPR did quite a large study on this together with the Namibian Media Trust. You can still find it on our website and have a look. It was published in 2019, so some of the data is a bit outdated, but I think a lot of it is still fairly relevant. Now we're speaking to this, most of the stuff that's in here, but there's also some new info which I will be presenting. Okay, what is media sustainability? Very quickly in a nutshell. It primarily concerns the financial viability of media operations. So we're not talking so much in terms of editorial independence and journalistic standards and ethics and so forth. We're talking primarily about, the money, making sure that the operation, the media houses can actually operate. And for a considerable long time, it was a sort of traditional business model, which was basically based on a media house providing news and other content such as sport, entertainment news as well, and that basically was paid for advertising and sales, mostly advertising, which is really crucial for especially newspapers and other media houses as well. So there's globally various different media systems placing emphasis on the commercial aspect of media or the public, as well as, of course, we're looking at the regulatory aspects. In Namibia, we have very much a mix of media operations. So we have state-owned, which is, of course, the NBC. We have Noera, we have Nampa. All of these media houses, must be mentioned, are also reliant in some way on advertising through sort of commercial channels to generate a bit of money, because we all know economic times are tough, so they can't just rely on the state. Then we have the commercial, which is, for example, in the Namibia Media Holdings. There's One Africa TV and various commercial radio stations. And then there's sort of non-profit media houses. The Namibian here, of course, springs to mind, as well as various community radio stations. A lot of these have suffered very much over the past couple of years, but I think there's still a couple going. As I said before, remaining financially solvent is really critical. So these media houses can still continue to deliver content. And there are various questions around this, of course. If financing goes down, the money isn't really that good anymore. You can't hire competent journalists. You struggle to produce a good, publication or a good radio show, and that might endanger, of course, you being attractive for the audience. And suddenly I lost the sound. It's back. Right. Let's talk a bit about digitalization. And I'm almost done. But this is seen as a really huge disruptive force, and I think many of us maybe don't quite realize, because we're always, we're on our phone, we're on the internet, we're using email, which is already old school. Most people use Slack or whatever today, and we are not quite cognizant of how disruptive this actually is to a lot of these traditional media houses and other organizations as well. So digitalization, simply put, is the process of converting information into a digital format. And once this is done, it becomes much more convenient to share, which was more radio or CD or a cassette, even. How boring. These days, you have Spotify, you have YouTube. Paying for music for a lot of us is maybe not really something that is really relevant for us. But obviously that has a huge impact on music producers, and the same as sort of with newspapers, if you will. It has really radically transformed how and when and where we can access, use and share information. We used to have to buy a newspaper every morning to figure out what is going on, or at least listen to a radio news. We don't need that anymore. You can scroll through Facebook and get all the news right there. You can look at WhatsApp, and friends will send you little clips, etc., etc. So this basically goes, and there's also a new way of generating and distributing media. So not just being a journalist going to a meeting and then writing a little article about it, which is then published next day. It's completely different. We can do quick, we can do little things immediately in the studio, or on your YouTube channel, or TikTok even, or Instagram, or whatever. You probably know more about it than I do. So, and this has basically put the business model of traditional media in jeopardy. Quick, that is not all boring, there's a graph. So this is from the Afrobarometer surveys. How often do you get news from the internet? There are a number of other statistics. Interestingly, Namibians, about 27% of Namibians in 2019 went for their news every day on the internet. It's not that huge, but still you see the drop. You also see at the bottom there's the scale which says who never goes on the internet for news, and it's been huge, almost 80% in 2012, and now it's less than 50%. So there is a gradual change of more people getting the news from the internet as opposed to radio or whatever else. Right, I already mentioned some of these issues for newspapers. Poor economic conditions obviously add to the issues around the challenge of digitalization. There's declining advertising revenue, and a lot of newspapers, for example, have to compete with social media for ad money, because social media is very powerful and very attractive, and obviously also very interesting for advertisers. Big corporates who want to advertise and reach a lot of people. Namibia has a very crowded media market. Various people have told me this. We have a lot of radio stations, we have a lot of newspapers. Is there really that much revenue in the economy to sustain all of these media houses? That's a question that's out there. Many people say no. There's also a negative impact on quality journalism. One can probably argue we have seen this over the past couple of years, and it's not just due to COVID, for example. It's not just due to the economic pressures, but how we consume, newspapers often these days struggle to get people who write decent articles, to source properly, to have interesting things. I'm not saying it's not out there, you still get it, but there is definitely concern. This is actually a global issue as well. So we're not just talking we're not just in a bubble. There's also concern about ownership and editorial independence. As we all know, if a big, let's say a big corporate buys a media house, that might be good for the media house in terms of finances, but what does that mean? What does that mean for the journalistic independence? Are those journalists still allowed to go out and do critical news on, the business sector? Or will that be curtailed because of financial interest of the holding company, for example? Mentioned already, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of these digital trends. A lot of newspapers struggled because they couldn't print and sell physical copies of newspapers, which obviously affected the sales very much. So more and more people have tried to find their news somewhere else, on Facebook, on other online platforms, and so forth. And this, of course, is impacting our media houses. There's also the issue of fragmentation of audiences and international competition. I think that's very self-explanatory. A lot of us probably have heard about Netflix. There's also, especially among young people, there's also fatigue and a disinterest with traditional news and media. And now I'm getting basically to the final slide, but it gives us something to talk about and to start off. So, social media remains a strong source of news for young people across the globe. And especially interesting is, the 18 to 24-year-olds, they're not that interested in Facebook anymore. They find Facebook old school. So they go to places like TikTok, for example, has taken off, especially in Asia. Nevertheless, social media is still quite a big source for news. A lot of young people do like, and when I say young, the document here talks about 18 to 34. So they do like the mix of visuals and text. Unlike a lot of the traditional stuff, which maybe just focuses on text. But we have to be careful. Young people are also very open to all sorts of formats. So it isn't just text and visuals, or just a nice clip on YouTube or whatever. So there's room for all sorts of mediums. Again, I think a lot of Latin American countries prefer podcasts, which other areas maybe not prefer. Another interesting thing that I found is globally, people younger than 35 are also more distrustful of news and very suspicious of brands. So perhaps they've become cynical about what they see as the traditional news. They don't trust it. Again, one must look at the certain regions. Interesting, I think South Africans trust news much more than the global average. I think it's on 61%. But young people overall, globally, are very distrustful. They also prefer a broader definition of news. So what the older generation sort of thought about news in terms of very hard-hitting politics, a bit of business, and perhaps one or two other issues. They don't see it that way. They would include news, also entertainment, sports, education as well. But it doesn't necessarily mean they prefer specific themes. So if some of you maybe thought that young people like only to look at issues around social justice or environment, that doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, last point I want to make, they're also increasingly news averse, which maybe is a concern, especially for media houses here, because more and more young people actively are trying to avoid news. They don't want to hear about it. Perhaps it's a mental health issue for them. We are not sure, but the data is indicating that a lot of under 35s are not really engaged in news anymore. So that's it. There you have it. Thank you very much.